Germany wanted world domination and revenge for the Treaty of Versailles. There was only one way they could do this. War. World war. Germany's strong dictatorship, headed by Adolf Hitler, gave the people of Germany what they needed to get out of the Depression. Jobs. Jobs in the military, as well as jobs in the production of military goods such as weapons and other things. Medicine, pots, pans, things you need to wage a war. Germany, in the year of 1937, had the third largest population in the world, numbering 67,830,000. The Germans manufactured weapons like the cruise missiles, jets, buzz bombs, and other weapons of mass destruction.
Germany was situated between France and Poland, Poland being the only country that separated Germany from Russia, which along with France and Britain to the north were Germany's greatest enemies. With enemies to their north, east, and west, Germany was in a difficult position, their only border ally being the Italians to the south.
Like Germany, Italy was also suffering from unfair prices on imports and exports from Allied powers after World War I. On top of this, Italy was also experiencing border disputes with its neighboring countries. It was the belief of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini that in joining the Axis powers with Germany, they would not only resolve these issues, but also create a second Roman Empire.
In doing this, Italy only forged its own path for failure. While the Italians possessed decent weapons and technology such as the Carcano M1938 carbine rifle, the flamethrower Modello 40, and the Semovente 1953 tank destroyer, they simply did not possess the population to hold out against the Allied powers. In 1929, the Italian population was approximately 40,550,000. Furthermore, while the Italian government may have been stable during the war, the people only fought for their leader half-heartedly.
Far from its fellow Axis powers, another German ally terrorized the coast of Asia, Japan, whose location was both a blessing and a curse. As an island nation, they were difficult to invade, but they lacked natural resources and were too far from their allies, and between Germany and Japan lay Russia. Japan's need of resources only fueled their desire to expand their empire, enslave their enemies, mostly the Chinese, and control a large chunk of global trade. Their warring with China after World War I had damaged their economy as well, convincing the strong dictatorial regime of the need to join the Axis powers.
Japan, unlike Italy, was situated far from its allies. But unlike Italy, Japan's large population was extremely devoted to its government. And at the beginning of the war, Japan's industrial capabilities as well as its weapons technology were advanced. But as World War II dragged on, they fell behind.
Besides Germany, Japan, and Italy, the Axis powers also received support from Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Finland, and Hungary. While not officially in the war, the Axis powers did receive financial and material support from Albania, Thailand, Slovakia, Portugal, Burma, and Spain. Also, German-occupied Poland.
Well, at the beginning of World War II, the Polish military was poor and outdated, consisting of cavalry, 6 air fighters, 3 destroyers, and a single cruiser. They had guts. Polish cavalry charged German tanks on horseback, and during the invasion of Poland, September 1st, 1939, all 6 air fighters went up. The kill ratio was 40 Germans and or Russians for every 1 Polish soldier. But the Polish simply did not have the population numbers to hold out against both Germany and Russia, or either one of them just invading alone. So by October 5th of 1939, the Polish were defeated. But the government, as well as the 3 destroyers, escaped to Britain for further operations against the Axis powers.
With the fall of Poland and the escape of its surviving military and democratic government, the Germans placed a Nazi dictatorship in power, with strong opposition from the Polish people. The Polish rebellion was the 3rd largest in Europe against Nazi control. However, after being conquered, Poland's industrial output increased, focusing in machinery, metals, food, beverages, textiles, and tobacco, and their weapons technology was revolutionized.
Poland's geographical position, being situated between Russia and Germany, led to its quick downfall. But once Poland was conquered, there was no longer anything to stand between Germany and Russia.
At first, Russia was actually allied with Germany due to want of part of Poland. But when Germany broke their Non-Aggression Act in 1941, Operation Barbarossa, the Russians acted in defense.
Russia would be Germany's worst mistake. Russia's strong military consisted of tanks, Katyusha rockets, and its massive population of approximately 156,100,000 people, which made the tactic of guerrilla warfare not only possible but effective. To top it off, Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, who ensured the survival of his reign like Hitler through propaganda, was a brilliant military commander. The tactics and weapons used to crush the German invasion at Stalingrad, August 23, 1942, to February 2, 1943, turned the war around. Population also factored into the size of their industry. And finally, their harsh winter would completely decimate the invading German forces. And after Stalingrad, with Poland gone under German control, there was nothing left to stand between the Germans and Russian vengeance. The French, having been a target of the Germans, wanted safety from the Germans, but they also wanted pieces of Germany. But it was Germany who would seize pieces of France in the fall of France between May 10th and June 5th of 1940.
After the fall of France, its republic government was soon changed to a fascist government known as Vichy France, which supported the Germans. Soon after its creation, it came under fire from southern French resistance and also escaped troops harbored in Britain, who all fought in the name of true France.
While France only had a medium population of about 41,230,000, they did possess decent industrial power and produced weapons such as anti-aircraft machine guns, the Brandt Mole 1935 mortar, and the Summa F-35 cavalry tank.
The Battle of Britain would prove to be the first failure of the German war machine, the beginning of the end, so to speak. Standing as the most industrialized nation in all of Europe, Britain had a relatively large population for its small landmass. This population supported a strong military, armed with cryptography, radar, funny tanks, a strong navy, and a tough air force.
During the German Blitz, women and children would be evacuated to Britain's vast countryside. Also, as an island nation, Britain proved too difficult to invade, but the Germans quickly adapted, turning their geographical position against them by cutting off trade routes.
The British Parliament, which still stands today, wanted the liberation of Poland, as well as the destruction of Nazi Germany, and their own survival. The survival of Britain would be one of the reasons that the United States joined World War II.
October 7th, 1941, the Pacific Theater welcomes a new power to the war. Japan, in the hopes of keeping the United States out of the war, bombed the U.S. naval base in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. Already, Americans of varying nationalities called for official participation in the war, had renewed enthusiasm, and now the U.S., who had already been providing war supplies and troops to aid Britain, joined the war in defense of itself and Britain, when Adolf Hitler also declared war on the U.S.
The United States, the straw that broke the camel's back, had the second largest population in the world, consisting of 122,250,000. While its population was rapidly producing military products, its military was blossoming into a force to be reckoned with. And now that its democratic government was no longer held back by the Non-Intervention Act, it would serve a swift revenge.
America constructed heavy machine guns, tanks, grenades, the very first nuclear weapon, and synthetic rubber. For communication, the U.S. military employed Navajo Indians, whose language was alien to the Axis powers. However, situated far across the sea, the Americans not only took time to reach their British allies, but also encountered problems with the German submarine. After the sharing of British technology blueprints, the difficulties presented by the Nazi U-boat was overcome. To solve its distance issue, the U.S. established and operated out of bases overseas.
Besides the three main Allied powers in World War II, the US, the UK, and the USSR, they received support from Australia, Belgium, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, China, Denmark, Greece, Mexico, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, Yugoslavia, and Iraq. Most military units that escaped their country in the last days of Nazi invasion would flee to Britain and continue fighting against the Axis forces. The defeat of Germany after Operation Kursk and the defeat of Japan in the bombing of Hiroshima, the Allied powers once again triumphed, but at a heavy cost. USSR's guerrilla warfare tactics cost them dearly, Germany bringing up a second and Japan third due to its military size and its citizens' commitment to die instead of surrendering. Experienced wounded numbers similar to their dead. Poland, France, Italy, and the UK getting away with lower numbers due to the amount of involvement and their tactics. The US's late start in the war also preserved a large chunk of its military. Eugene Hall of the 110th Infantry Regiment was wounded on September 14, 1944, and recalled the reason he was wounded and not dead. While I was laying there, some GI, I don't know if he was a medic or what, he came running out. He came up by me and asked if I was hit. He grabbed me and picked me up, put me over his shoulder, and started back towards those dragon teeth. I remember at first trying to pull him down. I said, "Get down!" but he didn't pay attention to me. I was just waiting for a bullet to hit us. But fortunately, we got back there, and he dumped me. The last I saw of him, he was heading out there again to pick up some wounded. Another survivor said this: "A new life breathed in the camp. Jeeps, command cars, and trucks drove around among the barracks. Khaki uniforms abounded, the marvelously substantial material of their battle dress mingled with rags of the deportees. Our liberators were well fed and bursting with health, and they moved among our skeletal silhouettes with a surge of life. We felt an absurd desire to finger them, to let our hands trail in their eddies, as in the fountain of youth. They called to one another, whistled cheerfully, then suddenly fell silent, faced with eyes too large or too intense a gaze. How alive they were! They walked quickly, they ran, they leapt. All these movements were so easy for them, with a single one of them would have taken away our last breath of life. These men seemed not to know that one can live in slow motion, that energy was something you saved." Was a different kind of survivor, a survivor of the Holocaust. The Holocaust, which played in the background of the World War II, claimed the lives of over 6 million, mostly Jews. About 1 million of these victims were children. Those who survived displayed psychological damage, including split personalities and emotional numbness. Furthermore, survivors were left homeless and still hated across Europe. Refugee countries of Palestine and Israel were created. World War II pulled the entire world out of the Depression, Axis powers and Allied powers alike. Though the GDP of the Allied countries increased, the GDP of most Axis forces decreased. In the USA, the seed for women's rights was planted, and the solitary nation officially stepped into the role of being a superpower, far surpassing Britain and France, who had suffered considerable damage. Rather than regaining old colonies like France had hoped, what colonial empire they had turned to dust. Britain likewise lost its colonial empire and a great many of its military outposts to the United States. Neither Britain nor France could compare with Russia anymore, who now held military supremacy over Europe. The Polish would be subject to Soviet rule until the 1980s, when they would finally get what they had longed for during World War II, the reinstatement of their sovereignty. Still, the murdering of Polish thinkers in the World War II and the damage done to industry and infrastructure would put them behind the rest of the world. Germany, Poland's first invaders, were utterly defeated and humiliated, with the Nazi regime now mere ashes. Germany's allies in the south, the Italians, lost their empire and their government was replaced by a democratic one, while Japan was stripped of its military capabilities and suffered from a temporary economic collapse until trade was reestablished by the U.S., who had caused severe damage to infrastructure in the bombing of Hiroshima.